After losing a loved one, oftentimes the most difficult period isn't the moment when you hear the news or all the chaos that occurs surrounding the funerals. Very often it is several days or even a couple of weeks later when suddenly you find yourself alone with your grief. The time when other people think you should be ready to move on, but you aren't ready to move on. It's hard to have that conversation with someone to share that you feel stalled in your grief and in your tears, because in some ways it's like admitting that you are broken and you don't know how to explain these unexpected emotions of grief. For those who need a gentle voice, in the weeks following the passing of a loved one, Lexham Press presents a new 90-day devotional by Katrina Larson. Katrina doesn't come as an expert theologian to explain how everything makes sense in your loss, but she comes as a friend to share her story with you so you can have someone to walk with through your grief. She tenderly brings faith, hope, and love through stories of her own journey with grief following the loss of her mother to help you navigate your own loss. There's nothing preachy or pretentious in this book. This is simply like having a friend who's willing to share their story of loss, confusion, crying when they don't understand why they are crying, so you can have someone else who gets it when you don't understand why your grief and your pain keeps popping back at sometimes the most inconvenient times in your life. Each day's devotional in this book is a brief 2 to 3 pages. Nothing that will interrupt or interfere with your life at large, but this might just be the few minutes of encouragement and grace that you need following your loss. And if you have a few minutes, I would like to tell you a little bit more about faith, hope, and love in a time of loss. Welcome to Rev Reads. If you want to discover more books on walking the Christian walk through this world of darkness, please subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with my latest book review. Also, like and share this video with others to let them know about the latest books from Lexham Academic. The most affordable way to build up a theological library today is through Logos Bible software. I encourage you to follow the link in the description in order to purchase your Logos edition of Faith, Hope, and Love in a Time of Loss. Or you could follow my other link in the description to subscribe to Logos and enjoy 60 days for free to discover their helpful Bible study tools. Katrina takes the reader on a 90-day journey with her as she shares her stories related to her mother's diagnosis with cancer, the loss of her mother shortly after her marriage to her husband, as well as her grief following that loss. Now, the structure of the devotional, each day's devotion begins with a scripture, followed by a narrative-driven account of Katrina's own story with loss and grief, and then she ties that to the reader with a simple application. Then each day's reading ends with a prayer. She really keeps this work focused on her narrative and helping to weave her stories with the lives and the struggles of her readers in a way that is never preachy or condescending. You never get the feeling reading this book that she's telling you the proper way to grieve. Katrina is free to share with you her own shortcomings and her own mistakes all along the way. I really think reading this book is providing the reader with a place to grieve with someone who understands the loss and then desires to help you turn in the direction of faith, hope, and love of Christ instead of being consumed by your loss and your grief and the darkness. One thing I want to say also is that this devotional is not delivered in chronological order. That is, the chronological orders of events in Katrina's own life. But this is sort of just a scattering of moments of pain or grief or loss or understanding that she had all throughout the process, not in order based on date. And I think that's important because I don't believe anyone's struggle with grief follows this basic chronological track. Now, there may be general patterns for all of us following a loss, but it varies so much from person to person, and that loss can really come upon you in unexpected ways. So I thought it was a really good move by the editor to jump back and forth in Katrina's own journey to reflect the reality that we jump back and forth with our own journeys of grief. Your journey with grief won't match hers, and that's fine. In fact, it's normal. I lost my own mother to cancer a few years ago. And I think that if this book was available at the time, I would have picked it up and read it. I don't think I would have read it for the entire 90 days and read the whole book. I probably would have read it for 30, maybe 60 days. Probably would have stopped somewhere between the 30 and 60 days. I didn't deal with grief as hard or as long as she did. My own journey was different from hers, but still think I could have benefited from reading from her story for a few weeks. And I say that to say it's a 90-day devotional. You don't need to read it for 90 days. No one's needing to say that you need to go through the loss period for that time. Maybe you only need the comforting presence alongside with you for a few weeks. Or maybe you're someone who could really benefit for the entire 3 months. Or maybe you are 6 months, 18 months removed from the loss of a dear loved one. You are still overwhelmed with waves of grief at times. The faith, hope, and love can feel very hard to come by. And maybe at this moment right now, it's time for you to read a book like this and allow another to come into you in a supportive, non-threatening, non-condemning voice to speak grace into your life. One thing I really appreciated about this devotional is her encouragement to not waste your grief or allow it to lead you down dark and unproductive paths. Because we need to remember grief is a good thing. It helps us process our emotions. It helps us come to terms with a dramatic change in our life that is caused by the loss of a person to whom we hold so dear. So grief can also be a springboard to launch you into service for others. Maybe other people who have experienced similar loss to you, or maybe people that you would only come into contact with because of your loss. And Katrina helps you, she encourages you not to remain inwardly focused, but to use your struggle as a way to serve others. And she also helps to direct you outward toward hope. I think the biggest danger of grief is that it can turn people into a state of hopelessness. We are at times tempted to think that life will never improve. We will never escape the cycle of loss, and our life can't recover from that loved one who is no longer with us. But there is always hope, and that hope is focused on Jesus Christ. I recommend this book to anyone who has recently lost a loved one, or if you're experiencing a long struggle with grief. Pastors should also be aware of this book in order to recommend it or give it to someone who is struggling with grief as a gift. So this is really good work by Lexham Press. I want to say producing this beautiful book. I gotta say, as soon as my wife saw it, she was like, oh, that book looks amazing. This might be the best looking paperback book that I own of all the books in my library. And so I want to thank Lexham for producing it. And I want to thank you to Katrina Larson for sharing your journey with the church.